Hey, I've been wanting to make this video for a long time now, but I couldn't justify that to the voice in my head saying that no one fucking needs that. But I need this, and shouldn't that be enough of a reason? You probably don't know me, but you might be facing the same kind of challenges in your own life, so you might find something here that resonates with you. What is this? A confession, probably. A story, if you will, along with some speculations. In a nutshell, closer to my 30s, I gradually started realizing that the life I was living wasn't quite mine. Can you call your life yours if the majority of the time you take decisions that someone else made for you? Sometimes it's obvious and easy to see. You might be in a relationship and with your partner you can't agree on how to spend a vacation, so you have to compromise. But most of the times the choices that are made for us are not on the surface. They go so deep that you would never even think about questioning their origins. They were planted in your head like in the movie Inception. You're fully programmed. Your whole existence is following a predetermined trajectory, and yet you naively think that you're the master of your life. And so did I, until something in this whole picture started feeling wrong. And then I kept ignoring that right up until the moment when everything started feeling wrong. Hence the first lesson learned. The longer you go in the wrong direction, the harder it'll be to get back on the right track. When I was around 18, I had many dreams, and I sincerely believed that fulfilling them would make me happy beyond words. I have to say that the majority of those dreams were ego-based and revolved around being cool, making money, and attracting beautiful women. In the university, I was in a very competitive environment, and oftentimes I wasn't entirely satisfied with the kind of person I was. I felt like I was weak, and I wanted to be strong. I was dating a girl, and once, after one socially awkward situation, she casually mentioned that she thought she was mentally stronger than me. I played my best to keep it cool, but truth be told, it hit me hard. Probably because she was right. And for me, it wasn't just about our relationship. She cast light on some areas of my life that I preferred not to look at. I became obsessed with an idea of changing that. But how? Where do I even begin? Where does this inner strength come from? I didn't know anything about that, but I was determined to figure it out. And there began my quest for inner strength, which later led me to spirituality and changed everything I used to know about life. I became more of an observer. I started seeing the trajectories of my classmates' lives. I could say who was bound to be successful and who was destined to die in mediocrity. I looked at my life and I had to admit that I probably belonged to the second group. It felt like prison. You're fully defined by your background and your past, and there's nothing you can do to change your future. And since then, pretty much all I've been doing is trying to escape that prison of mind. After graduating from the university, I felt like my real adult life had finally begun. I set the course on fulfilling the dreams I believed to be mine. Some of them I failed, some just lost their appeal, but others I did bring to life. And yet that changed very little on the inside. I thought maybe I just wasn't doing enough, and if I work more and put in more effort, I achieve more, that will make me feel happier and more fulfilled. And that led me to a very strange period of my life. On the surface, things kept improving. I made a few bold career moves that promised a better future, and I was in a relationship with a person worth sharing that future. I must have been happy, right? I believe I had to, given the circumstances. But deep inside, I wasn't. And that kept getting worse. When I look back at my life now, it makes a lot of sense. But back then, I had no idea what was going on. I felt empty, uninspired, and lost. And on top of that, I felt guilty about feeling this way, having such a nice life. So I swept it all under the rug and kept doing the right thing, following the right course and doing what people expected me to do. After a while, it put so much weight on my shoulders that it was slowly becoming unbearable. That sensation of existential heaviness became my normal state of being. But for some reason, I did my best to pretend that everything was fine. The image of a depressed and motivated and complaining guy in his 20s just disgusted me. But I wasn't sitting and waiting, I was looking for answers. I found some relief in spirituality and dozens of self-help books. I experimented with yoga and meditation and went on a few spiritual retreats. They didn't solve all my problems, but they did feel like a breath of fresh air when I was suffocating. In those moments, I felt reconnected with something I didn't even know how to call. My authentic self, my soul, my spirit. But for a while, it made me feel alive and confident that it's in my power to build the life I truly wanted. The problem was that people around me, especially the closest ones, thought that I was wasting my time on some spiritual boogie-woogie instead of focusing on my career and real life. That was tearing me apart. Every day I had to choose between me and others. And usually I chose others because I was defining myself through my image in other people's minds. For a long time I was rejecting that quiet inner voice of my soul and convincing myself to live a normal life. Do what's considered to be cool, that brings money, buy things, travel to nice places, and by all means enjoy life. The problem was that it wasn't the kind of life I could truly enjoy. It felt empty, meaningless, boring, and above all else, not mine. I believed that there was a true calling, that I had a mission in this world, that there was a path in life destined specifically for me, and if I find and follow it, it'll make me truly and genuinely happy. It will fill my life with purpose, meaning, as well as material abundance, which is also important to me, just not primary. The longer I dug for answers, the clearer it was becoming that the life that I truly wanted was completely different from the life I had. Actually, at the time, I had no idea what I really wanted. I just knew that it wasn't what I had. I felt like my place in life was somewhere out there, waiting for me to find it. So I had to keep looking. I didn't have the right to stop. On the other hand, my current life was pretty much settled. I had a good foundation and I just had to keep building on it. That meant that to keep looking for a life that I wanted with my soul, I had to destroy the life that I had built with my mind. And I just didn't have the balls to do that. I kept rejecting that part of me that believed that there was more to life and wanted to keep looking for it, and forcing myself into living normal, socially endorsed life. Until it started to feel like a life and death matter. It literally reflected on my health. I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's thyroiditis. It's when your immune system attacks your own thyroid gland, which couldn't be a better illustration of an inner conflict. I began to realize that something had to be done, and the only way to survive that crisis was to break my soul out of the prison I put so much effort into building. I broke up with my partner, changed jobs, and cut all contacts with my family. I moved to a new apartment and I relished the fact that not a single person knew where I lived, except for a landlord. I just wanted to be left alone. That process was devastating for everyone involved. The next phase was overwhelming guilt. Although I knew that what I did was absolutely necessary and there wasn't any other way around it, I still felt terrible about hurting people who didn't deserve it. After a few months, I decided that it was time to pull myself back together and carry on. I thought I had started a new life, but now when I look back at it, I realized that I was still running from the old one. I went to parties and swamped myself with work. I did everything to numb the pain. Later, with the help of a friend, I started a company. It was something I always wanted to do. I thought it would lift my spirits and bring some meaning into what I was doing with my life. And for a moment, it did feel nice. It just didn't last long. Instead of running towards my goals and being proactive, I barely found the energy to do the necessary minimum. From time to time, I would return to my bizarre dreams, which had nothing to do with the kind of life I had at the time. Before, I had never taken them seriously, not even because they were bold and ambitious, but because they were completely irrelevant to what I consciously wanted to achieve in my life. Now I understand that they didn't come from my socially conditioned mind, they came directly from the soul. My biggest dream ever was to travel the world, but it had to be a very specific kind of traveling. I didn't want to be just another tourist visiting new countries with friends or family, staying in hotels and taking photos in all the must-see locations based on a previously composed itinerary. It had to be a solo journey. I was fascinated with the idea of roaming distant lands, diving into local cultures, enjoying local food, meeting friends, and all that without having any plan whatsoever. I felt an unusual attraction towards South America, and I couldn't trace back its origins. I wanted to learn Spanish for no particular reasons. I just loved the sound of it. And also I wanted to learn Latin dances. Of course, in Ukraine, I never had time for any of that. Although I took a few Spanish classes and one class of bachata, I quickly realized that it was hopeless. Because both things required the level of dedication I just couldn't provide. Like I said, I barely had the energy to do the necessary minimum in my work. But I kept dreaming. And curiously enough, all those dreams could be combined into one big picture. I closed my eyes and pictured myself traveling through South America while learning Spanish and Latin dances. It seemed so unrealistic that I treated those dreams merely as my mind's attempt to escape the reality that I didn't quite like. Even after burning all the bridges with my past life, it still felt crazy to follow those dreams. In the meantime, I was sitting in the office, lawyering and thinking that it was definitely not something that I wanted to do for the rest of my life. By that time, I became more honest with myself, but still I was balancing between you have to do it and what's the point. It was the beginning of February 2022. I was scrolling through Instagram and stumbled upon a reel where a guy was talking about the beauty of the idea of traveling alone in a car. And I felt like something clicked inside me. After a few days of self-doubting, I decided that I would wait until spring and then I would do it, if nothing changes. I didn't want to make any promises to myself because I wasn't sure I could deliver. I was carefully thinking about jumping into my car and traveling through Europe all the way to Portugal to see the ocean for the first time. That idea excited me, so I started preparing mentally to leave everything behind and resist the confused faces of people around trying to understand what would be happening and asking questions like, how can you do that? You've just started the company. What's your plan? When are you coming back? I wish I knew. I just felt that leaving everything behind part was very important. It couldn't be just a vacation with a return date and with everything waiting for me as I left it. I knew that it had to be an open-ended solo journey without any plans and without a return date. It was like some kind of force was pulling me onto the greatest adventure of my life. It felt mysterious and promising. A few weeks later, though, the war started and the borders got closed. And the same kind of force was now pulling me in a different direction. I joined the army. It might sound a bit counterintuitive, but war brought some peace into my life. Before that, I was being torn apart by two contradictory ideas. To carry on with my current life, which didn't feel like mine, and to leave everything behind and embark on a journey into the great unknown at the risk of looking completely insane to everyone I knew. Both options were really scary. I had to make a choice, but I kept postponing. And the weight it was putting on my shoulders was becoming unbearable. The war was an event of great significance that I couldn't ignore. I joined the army and just accepted that it was the part of my path where very little depended on me. So I had just to go with the current. And in the meantime, review my life and decide what to do next when it's all over. That was very liberating. Soon I found out that existential crisis disappears like this when the survival instinct kicks in. I had to accept death as a possibility, and after I did so, it gave me a weird sense of freedom. As I said earlier, trying to fix my existential issues, I read a lot of self-help books, and in many of them I found the same kind of practical advice. Imagine that you have just a few months left to live. What would you do? It never worked on me because I felt like there was a big difference between intellectual speculation and the actual experience of the proximity of death. It was very difficult, being in good health and safety, to imagine how would you feel and what you would want to do if you were about to die. But now suddenly it was very easy to imagine. Surprisingly, it didn't shift my perspective too much. I just got the feeling that my death wouldn't change anything in the grand scheme of things. The world would just go on as if nothing had happened, and I was at peace with that. I didn't have many regrets, and I thought I had a good life in terms of experience. All the worries of everyday life just seemed ridiculous from that standpoint. Time was passing by, and because I felt a bit rested from that existential pressure, I started thinking that when the war is over, I would recover my company and carry on lawyering. That was what I call inertial thinking. Why would you want to go back to a place you just try to escape from? Luckily, I had time to ponder on things, and slowly I arrived at a decision that that chapter of my life was over. But what else would I do? Probably something that would bring me joy and make me feel good. I love books and stories, and a year or two before the war began, I started writing one of my own. Of course, I never had time to give it enough attention, and my mind would just dismiss that idea because I had things to do in real life. It wasn't the first time, though, that I tried writing. As a kid, I would write some fan fiction stories based on what I watched on TV or read in books. Then I remembered my teenage years when I wrote songs and spent nights trying to find tutorials on Adobe Audition 3.0. I also made some recap videos of my family's trips to my grandparents in Windows Movie Maker. That was so interesting and fulfilling, but of course I couldn't follow along with that because that wouldn't give me a real job. Having had enough of that normal life, I thought maybe the time had come to reignite that childhood passion of mine. Of course I couldn't go back to singing because that was horrible, and it still is. But filmmaking seemed like a very attractive option. Plus, I was determined to finish my book, if only I could make it back alive. The more I kept thinking about that, the more I was shifting from if I die, well, I've had an interesting life, to if I keep living, my life is going to be so much more interesting than before. I felt like I was about to let out the part of me that I had locked in the basement a long time ago. I reflected a lot on my past and started realizing that in so many ways, I was just afraid to chase the kind of life I truly wanted. I realized that deep inside I was quite different from the majority of people that surrounded me, started from my family. And oftentimes, being different was a bug rather than a feature. So by blending in and being like the rest of the good kids, I was just trying to deserve love and validation from people whose opinion was very important to me. Like most of us, when I wanted to try something new, I was afraid of failing. But the worst part wasn't the failing itself, it was the judgmental eyes of close people and the feeling that they don't understand me. It's not easy to realize how big might be the part of your life that is built around your fear of being rejected. And what you call free will is nothing more than your unconscious desire to avoid the pain. But on the surface, things look different. We don't like to admit that we are afraid of something. I'm not a coward, I just don't want to go there. And our hard-working minds would gather a list of reasons why it's objectively not a good idea to go there. Many times when I had to take a decision, I thought I used my mind to analyze the situation, to weigh my options and choose the best of them. When in reality, the choice had been made long before, and my mind was just working to justify that choice, to make it seem logical and reasonable. Like I said, I had time to ponder on things. So after that life review and all the insights it provided, I felt alive like I hadn't felt in a very long time. And my bizarre dreams weren't bizarre anymore. They were just dreams. A bit later, I started a bucket list, as in a list of things that I would do if I make it back alive. The first and the biggest item on that list was a round the world solo journey. That would be the first thing I would do when I come back from service. I finally felt the courage to do that, even if no one would understand me. I kept thinking about filmmaking, and once, while talking on the phone with a friend, I shared that idea. And he said, "How great, I once also dreamed about being a cameraman." I took it as a good sign and said that maybe it's time that we make these dreams come true. I felt so inspired. After a year and a few months, I became a civilian once again. I rested a little, went to Vipassana, and then I felt ready for action. I met with the friend I mentioned. We talked more about filmmaking and got so inspired with the idea that we decided to start a production studio. The problem was that neither of us had any experience in the field. During the meeting with another friend, he said that his brother was a filmmaker, and I could meet with him to talk about the industry and get some advice as to where to begin. That's what I did next, and that meeting seemed to dispel all my worries about the future. The guy turned out to be a talented filmmaker, and most importantly, he had been carrying the idea of starting a production studio for quite some time now. What a serendipity, I thought. After a profound conversation, we decided to unite our efforts. He would do the hard skill stuff, and my friend and I would, in the beginning, take care of business side of things. Now there were 3 of us, and our ambitious goal seemed perfectly achievable. We composed a plan, and I remember saying to a friend that what could possibly go wrong if we just follow these steps? If we stay consistent, we are bound to succeed. And what about my idea to go on a solo journey the first thing after returning, you might be asking? Well, I decided that it had to wait due to the lucky circumstances around the production studio. I promised myself that when I have everything on track with it, then I would go on a journey, in about a year or so. Guess what happened next? The guy who was a filmmaker got offered a job as a dog trainer on the other side of the country. He loved dogs, he had one, and a friend of his offered him to join a project which apparently had something to do with that. That was unexpected. So there were just 2 of us left, upset but still determined. We recomposed the plan and carried on with it. By the way, to give this project his best, my friend moved to Kiev from another city, and after a week, he had to go back for a weekend to sort out some unfinished business. At 3 a.m. on a Saturday night, he sent me a long text saying that I'm very sorry, I'm not coming back due to some personal reasons. I felt like the rug was pulled from beneath my feet. Everything fell apart before it even properly started. I was stressed, but just for a few minutes. Then a silly smile ran through my face, and I had the most unusual conversation that had ever happened in my head. The voice said, "In the time of uncertainty, you promised to yourself that if you came back alive, you would go on the journey the first thing. You lied to yourself again. You betrayed your biggest dream for a slightly upgraded comfort zone. That was your best chance. Do you really believe that after working hard on the project for a year, putting all your energy into it, creating more and more responsibilities, you would just abandon it and run away to roam the world?" And all of a sudden, it was crystal clear that I wouldn't. I did lie to myself. From somewhere, I knew that what happened with the guys wasn't a coincidence. I felt like the universe itself intervened to guide me. And now it wasn't giving me ambiguous signs or whispering in my ear. It was yelling in my face. I started detecting in my head ideas that weren't the product of my own thinking. It felt like someone just planted them there. I knew that I had to act swiftly and without overthinking. I had to trust. I knew that if I wasted my time trying to understand logically what was going on, my mind would have come up with a very convincing and perfectly reasonable explanation why I shouldn't do that. I texted my landlord that I was moving out and put my car and an old laptop for sale. I felt tense and worried, My mind was a hive of thoughts. But I said to myself, look, if this is your path and the universe is guiding you like you think it is, everything should go smoothly. But if you're hitting obstacles on every step of the way, you'll know that it was just a glitch in the matrix. But if you chicken out and you don't even try because you're afraid, that will become the biggest regret in your life. And it worked. I moved my things to my parents' place, sold the laptop, and found a buyer for the car. I was in such a hurry that I left an attorney power for a friend to finalize the sale. After a few days, I was in Europe. My true solo journey started in Berlin. For the first time in my life, I was completely on my own in a country where I didn't know anyone. I felt like I crossed an invisible threshold and life was never going to be the same. I could write a whole book on that journey alone, but in a nutshell, that was the most profound and transformative experience in my life. It was better than 1,000 therapists and the best spiritual retreat you can imagine. I felt like the universe paved that path with lessons tailored specifically for me. That was the greatest adventure of my life, my biggest dream made reality. At last, I was a wild spirit roaming distant lands. I submerged myself into different cultures, different mentalities and customs. I savored local food. My accommodations ranged from fancy hotels to cheap hostels, to cabins in the woods, to farms in the mountains. I was a stranger who met other strangers and they became friends. I met other people like me who traveled alone. They were seekers. I realized that a solo journey is always spiritual. It's always a quest for something more, something that words can't describe. It's a transition to another level of understanding life. On this road, you don't meet people who are genuinely happy with the course of their lives, who know what they're going to do tomorrow, the day after, or 10 years from now and feel excited about that. These types of people don't tend to leave everything behind all of a sudden and jump into the unknown. On this road, you usually meet people who are looking for something with no idea what that is, but they know that something's missing and they are brave enough to look for it. I felt a weird sense of connection with something far beyond my comprehension. But don't get me wrong, the journey wasn't always nice, beautiful, and euphoric. Sometimes I got into trouble. I felt stressed, tired, and lost, and thought, what in the hell am I doing with my life? After my adventures in Mexico with a dense travel schedule, where I had a flight or a bus trip every few days, I came to Costa Rica exhausted. For a couple of weeks, I stayed in San Jose. I wasn't interested in sightseeing or any other tourist activity. I thought I would rest and write my book. At the outset of my journey, I believed that I'd have perfect conditions to finish it. I thought I would be inspired and have all the time in the world. But when the perfect conditions came, I felt like a burnt-out traveler. I just stayed in and watched Netflix and left my Airbnb just to go out to eat something and then come back home. I felt so much pressure and I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to go back home because my journey wasn't finished yet. And on the other hand, what was the point in continuing it with this mood? And then one day I was loading the laundry and I heard that voice again saying that you're exactly where you're supposed to be at this phase of your journey. You're doing everything right. To be clear, I didn't literally hear a voice. It was like an unsolicited thought just popped into my head. I was thinking it, but it didn't feel mine. I decided to do a digital detox and applied for a volunteer program on a farm in the mountains. A family of 3 amazing women hosted me and a couple of other volunteers. A lot had happened in 10 days. We worked, had fun, and spent evenings having long and profound conversations about life, spirituality, and the cultures of our countries. The girls were pure souls, full of love and light and kindness. When I got on a bus back to San Jose, my eyes were watery. I was about to cry out of happiness. Life seemed so beautiful and kind to me, and I was so in love with it. I felt blissful. But it wasn't euphoria, it was inner peace, gratitude, and transcendent love. The culmination of my journey happened in Ecuador. This is where I discovered that this journey was never open-ended like I thought. It was the most mystical experience in my life. I would even call it transpersonal. I came to Quito and spent about a month just enjoying my life. I watched movies, took long walks, and explored the city. I fell in love with the local food. I took a few dance classes and made some friends in that school. An acquaintance of mine with whom I crossed paths in Ireland at the beginning of my journey was now coming to Ecuador. He's an expert and needed to make some content to promote his services. And I was an aspiring filmmaker, so we figured we could help each other. He said he did a little research and found out that there's a beautiful city in Ecuador called Cuenca, and suggested that we go there. I'd never heard about that city, but as a person with no plans whatsoever, I didn't object. Before going, I asked my dance teacher if she knew a good place in Cuenca where I could keep learning dancing, and she recommended me 2 local schools. The city turned out to be an excellent choice. Surrounded by the mountains, it was relaxed and yet dynamic and vibrant, with beautiful views and kind people. After a few days of exploration of the city, I texted 2 recommended schools and only 1 replied to me. So the choice was obvious. I went to the school and started taking classes with a pretty girl as my teacher. And then it started happening. With every class, I felt more and more attracted to her. And although she kept things professional on the surface, I knew that she was feeling something too. Not even because she gave me signs or hints, but because I was sure that what I felt for her couldn't be random or unilateral. It just wouldn't make any sense. It's like when you're watching a movie and you see the first scene with the main character and everything's telling you that she's the one. And you know that the story just begins. I felt like something was unlocked inside me, like a new sense organ started functioning in my body. The chemistry was overwhelming, but it wasn't superficial. It touched something very deep inside me. It might sound weird or even naive, but I got a very distinct feeling that this meeting was planned and agreed upon. I feel like my whole life I'd been isolated in some kind of bubble, and then it just popped. And I found myself in a whole new reality. I felt the interconnectedness of everything in my life, and even in the world. I looked at my life and there were many things that seemed random. I thought, why would that happen to me? And now I realized why. Now everything made sense. Not on the surface, because often if you try to understand on the superficial level why something happened to you, you might come to the conclusion that the reason for that something has nothing to do with you. So you can't see the connection between the cause and effect, and you think that it must have been a coincidence or luck, good or bad. But now I didn't just intellectually understand that. I felt that everything that had happened in my life, I myself attracted, created. So many random events, decisions, and actions just rearranged into one cohesive path, which led me here. Starting from those bizarre dreams to travel through South America to learn Spanish, Latin dances, I was thinking about every tiny coincidence that had to fall in place to make it all work. Initially, with my friend Alex, we planned to meet in Costa Rica, but plans changed. Then he suggested to go to a city I'd never heard before, and my first dance teacher recommended me just 2 schools out of many, and one of them didn't reply me on time, and many more things like that. I even saw kind of checkpoints that I had to pass because it was mandatory. For example, I knew that if I didn't go to war, I wouldn't have come to Ecuador. I probably wouldn't even go on a journey. But because of the distinct feeling that this place was waiting for me and I was destined to come here, I had to accept the fact that everything was connected like domino pieces. You take out one piece, you break the chain, and you'll never reach your destination. Note that the words destiny and destination come from the same Latin root. I think that the relation between those 2 words is very poetic. Destination describes the external point, while destiny describes the internal purpose behind reaching it. For so many years I felt isolated, lost, and was looking for meaning and purpose and guidance and my unique path in life. And now I realized that all this time I was walking it, and it couldn't be more unique. Suddenly, my whole life felt like a book, a movie, where I was the main character, and all other people were supporting characters or extras. Meanwhile, the next guy was the main character in his own movie, where I could play a supporting role or be a background actor, and everything was intertwined in this divine universe. And this is how a new chapter of my life began. I would even call it a new volume. And the most valuable lesson that I learned in this journey is that you have to listen to this inner voice. Call it what you want, your subconscious mind, your soul, your spirit, the universe, God, life, but listen to it, because it knows so much more than your worried, conditioned, and limited mind. Listen to it even if what it's suggesting doesn't make sense at the time. And trust it. Like Steve Jobs said, you can only connect the dots looking backward, but you have to move forward. So do what you have to do. Like I'm doing right now. I've been resistant to make this video for a hell of a long time. My stubborn mind was sabotaging me to the best of its abilities, plucking the strings of fears and doubts. I felt like there was a little hurt kid inside me, afraid that people would laugh at me and judge me. My mind was desperate to rationalize everything and throw me off track. Why are you doing this? What is it that you want to achieve with it? You intend to record the video and upload it to YouTube so that everyone can see it. But do you think anyone needs that? Record it, but keep it to yourself. It reminded me of that elevator scene from the movie Revolver. I don't know exactly why I'm doing this and what is it that I try to achieve with it, but I know that I have to do it. And if my life experience taught me anything, is that when you know that you have to do something and don't do it on your terms, life will force you into it, and chances are in less favorable circumstances. By the way, now that I'm doing this, I feel like the huge weight has been lifted off my shoulders. And funny as it is, my mind is now justifying the whole thing, focusing on the bright side. In a nutshell, I just wanted to express myself, but was afraid of it because of my past experience. My soul is pushing me to grow while my mind is trying to protect me from pain. I believe it's the natural desire of the soul to express itself in this world, and that has nothing to do with what society expects from you and if somebody really needs what you have to express. That is the art of being human, expressing oneself. You can only know if the world needs what you have to give if you keep giving it. A street musician starts playing a melody which the crowd feels drawn to. People stop to listen, they record and share with others, and the art keeps expanding. It would have been weird if that artist asked random people on the street if they wanted him to become a musician, wouldn't it? Someone said that consciousness is something that allows you to know yourself, which is what the universe is all about. And that is the fundamental human aspiration since the dawn of time, to know oneself. So it's not just me who's getting to know myself, it's the whole universe getting to know itself through me. I could talk like that for hours, but suddenly I don't feel that need anymore. I feel like I've said everything I had to say. I made my next step, and I encourage you to make yours. Cheers.